BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, plans for a new national park in Scotland are dropped.
Thank God that's over. Really welcoming to see the government listening.
This is really hugely disappointing news. Once again, Galloway has been neglected by Scottish Government.
More on that later. Let's start, though, with Ryan Perry. He started off feeding the pigs at his local city farm in Gateshead at the age of 7. Those Tamworth pigs ignited something in Ryan, and now he's on a smallholding with more pigs, 3 breeds of sheep, goats, poultry and cattle, and he's vice chair of the Rare Breed Survival Trust. All of this is done on top of a full-time job in the NHS as a biomedical scientist. Kaz Graham met Ryan on what turned out to be quite an eventful day on the smallholding.
Here they come. These pigs are lovely. Oh, chestnutty, orangey kind of colour.
These are Tamworths. There's about 250 breeding sows in the UK. There's a lot of more people that have Tamworth pigs. However, if the pigs aren't registered, they're not necessarily a Tamworth. You can't then trace any of their pedigrees. The reason I keep all of my breeds pedigree registered is because it's preserving the breed and it's a document of history. So we're just going to the lambing shed. There's a Jacob just having a lamb.
It's all go, I'm telling you. What have we got going on here?
She still hasn't had a second lamb, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to check that lamb's correctly presented, because it's been a little bit longer than I'd expect.
So there she is. She's on her side now,
and I'm just having a little feel, and yes, there is a second lamb. And unfortunately, it's a breech lamb, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just try and lamb this sheep.
and breech will mean it's a bit harder to get that lamb out. It's the wrong way up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's upside down, essentially coming out backwards.
And you've just got your arm going up inside this ewe, up to a uterus, looking for the lamb, looking to see if you can help. You can really see the concentration on Ryan's face. We're really focused. Oh, and here we come. You've just pulled out this lamb.
So I've just turned this lamb round inside the ewe.
So we'll see if it's okay. So it's all covered in the mucus that it's been surrounding him in. Oh, look at that. There was a little shake of the head there.
I've just cleared its airways. I'll carry on doing so.
Yeah, so you're just, basically, you've got your fingers going into its mouth and all around its nostrils, clearing the mucus off it. Tell us a bit about how you got to be so fond of rare breed livestock, and about how your interest in livestock came about.
So I think it was just luck and chance, I guess. I lived on the end of the terraces where this 25-acre community farm was, an open green space, and it was considered the best kept secret in Gateshead. I first got involved just as foot and mouth finished back in 2001. I think I was about 7-8 years old at the time, and I remember one of my first jobs was feeding pigs. My mum tells me that when I was a child I once ran away and she found me at the farm. I think I was just always obsessed with the farm animals. I owe a lot to the people that worked at the community farm. They took me out to the agricultural shows around the country. We would take the pigs and the sheep, and I remember just being kind of, I don't know, in this world of agriculture, which I feel quite comfortable in.
Oh, just while we're talking, look, this lamb is just about getting onto its feet now, isn't it? She's kind of uncurling her legs from underneath there as we speak. She's just about done it, hasn't she?
Yeah.
There we go. Look, there we go.
And you can hear more from Kaz and Ryan on this weekend's On Your Farm. That's here on BBC Radio 4 at 6:30 on Sunday morning. A rise in the number of deer is having an impact on habitats and farmland in the Broads National Park. All this week we've been looking at national parks, and in the Norfolk Broads a drone survey to assess the numbers has been carried out, and the figures have come as a bit of a shock. Anna Hill joined Broads National Park Environment Advisor Andrea Kelly and farmer Lewis Bohr to find out more.
What we've walked on is actually a well-worn path that's probably Chinese water deer. And if you look at this boundary dike between the nature reserve, the fen, and our arable land, you've got the crossing point across the ditch.
That reminds me of the Serengeti and the buffalo going across the river.
Yep.
I mean, they've trampled this side, haven't they?
If you look on the other side of the dike, in this ecologically sensitive area, they're doing exactly the same thing in this protected site.
Andrea Kelly, Environment Policy Advisor. What we've been doing is looking at the trackways. The trackways in the winter, in our permanent reed vegetation, can be seen from the air. If we think about the fen here, 11% is being destroyed by those trackways, by those footprints. Total destruction, nothing is living. So if I were to try and get a consent from Natural England to destroy 11% of the fen, I'm sure they would have something to say.
Drone surveys have been undertaken. The last one in the Broads was the largest ever in the UK, covering 25,000 hectares to gauge how many deer there are. It showed the densities were 20 animals per square kilometre. Previous work in Scotland has shown to allow regeneration of habitat, deer numbers had to be much lower, at 5 animals per square kilometre. Back out in the national park, Lewis Bohr told me the impact that the deer are having on his business as a farmer.
That is a drought-affected field. We will not grow an agricultural crop, food crop on there again until the deer are under control. 2 years.
That's a serious choice you've made.
It is, and it's based on the finances insofar as 2 years ago we had sugar beet on there. When we came to harvesting, we didn't have a single leaf left in the field and they'd started eating the roots. And the other risk to us is when we're combining is contamination of the grain by deer faeces. So the plan is no more food crops on this 38 acres. They're going to be growing sustainable farming incentive options, wild bird and legume mixes. Well, we've been looking at the reed fen, and next to it here is some wet car woodland.
These are really rare, actually. Globally, wet woodlands have been destroyed, removed. I haven't been down here, actually, for probably about 3 or 4 years, and I'm surprised at what we're seeing now. This is visually dramatically different. We really have no vegetation here in this woodland at all.
Well, also with us here is Tom Ewan. He's from the Farming, Wildlife and Advisory Group in Norfolk. They've been working to try to get venison into the food chain from animals culled in the Broads.
We've been working with farm shops, pubs and restaurants. The small deer, the Chinese water deer and the muntjac aren't worth very much to a game dealer because they're smaller, they're more work for less reward. By creating more local commercial opportunities, it adds a value to the smaller species, which will incentivise the culling.
Would you like to see no deer, Lewis?
I have moles on the farm that cause me problems in my grazing. I control them every year, but we never wipe them out, and I would never wish to. There's a place for everything in the proper balance.
Lewis Bohr in the Broads National Park in Norfolk. Well, there will not be a new national park in Galloway and Ayrshire. The Scottish Rural Affairs Secretary, Mairi Gougeon, has announced that following a consultation, the park doesn't have enough support locally and so will not go ahead. Kevin Keane, BBC Scotland's Rural Affairs correspondent, was in Wigton in Galloway for the decision and told me how it came to this.
Well, this, Charlotte, has come off the back of the power-sharing agreement between the Scottish Greens and the SNP when they were jointly in power in the Scottish Government. And really the motivation for this came from the Scottish Greens. They'd promised in their manifesto that they would deliver a third national park for Scotland by the end of the current Scottish parliamentary term, which ends next year. So there was a bit of a rush on. There was an open invitation for people, communities that wanted to bid to have a national park to submit their interest. 5 parts of Scotland did that, and then 10 months ago the Galloway bid was the one that was named by the Scottish Government as the preferred bidder. That then had to go through a due process, and in that 54% of respondents were opposed to the scheme, 42% were in favour, and if you just broke that down to local community representatives, then that gap was even wider. So it seemed there was certainly a fairly significant vocal opposition to this, although if you speak to those behind the bid, they think that actually there was a silent majority in favour, but it's those who were opposed to it who have now won out.
And what's been the response from Galloway and Ayrshire?
Well, I mean, quite a bit of shock, although over the last few days there had been some rumblings that this was coming. I mean, the people behind the bid say they've spent the last 8 years working up to this point, and all of that they feel has been shattered in one afternoon. Of course, on the opposite side, there are many, not least landowners, farmers, who collectively had been opposed to this, who are breathing a sigh of relief. One of those farmers is Colin Ferguson, a dairy farmer from Wigton, and also you'll hear from Rob Lucas, the chair of the Galloway National Park Association.
I think it's a bit of relief, a bit of, yeah, thank God that's over, but really welcoming to see the government listening. A national park, obviously, it did bring some benefits, but I felt the trade-offs outweighed what benefits we could bring. This region needs employment, it needs people, it needs business, and I just felt a national park would, yes, it would bring tourism, it would bring people, and it would bring money into the region, but what we need is money, business and people all year round, not just for the summer.
This is really hugely disappointing news for not only the association and its supporters, but for the whole of Galloway, because once again, Galloway has been neglected by Scottish Government. Not only has a national park not been taken forward, but we've got no other proposals. We've got nothing else on the table, no promise of money, not even a timeline for when that might happen.
So is that it now, Kevin? Or will the government look for somewhere else?
Well, I'm not sure there's any appetite for looking somewhere else, not in the immediate future, but this area, I'm in Wigton, and this area, this kind of corner of Scotland, the southwest corner, has often felt very much overlooked, and I think a lot of that had come out in the course of this process. And so the Scottish Government, as part of its response to this, has said that it will now look at some of the recommendations from Nature Scots report to try and enhance and build upon the concerns that some of these local people have raised around infrastructure. I mean, there's a road that runs from the main motorway at Gretna to the ferry port at Cairn Ryan that serves Northern Ireland, and there's long been concern that that's not been big enough to cope with the volume of ferry traffic and any additional tourists that might come with it. Of course, many people here would like to see more tourists coming if there's the infrastructure to come with it, so that they're not regarded as this forgotten corner of Scotland. And the Minister says that she will look at and consider very carefully some of those recommendations.
Kevin Keane there. Just time before we go to mention insects, both vital and annoying for farmers. At midday today here on BBC Radio 4, the first in a new series of Rare Earth takes a deep dive into the insect world with Dr Kelly Jowett from Rothamsted Research, where they've been calculating the perfect balance between crops and insects since the 1960s.
What we like to see in terms of supporting insects is habitat diversity and a habitat mosaic. So different habitats in juxtaposition with each other. Huge fields of monoculture, that's like a desert to an insect. There's no food resources there, there's not going to be persisting over time. So it's adding that complexity into the landscape, which is natural, isn't it? That is what insects have evolved in. So building that back into farms is keeping those insects in the fields where they need to be doing these services, such as cycling nutrients into the soil, controlling pests.
So the message is that, you know, our natural landscapes are complex places, and if we let them be a little bit complex, nature will find its niches and it'll be more resilient.
Yes, resilience is the key.
Helen Chersky talking there to Dr Kelly Jowett. More of that on Rare Earth. But that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Heather Simons, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.